Hi, I'm Rob Penzak.
And I'm Rick Wingrove.
Welcome to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. Now, Rick, I know you've been away for the last couple of weeks. You were married a few months ago, but you just had a secular ceremony. Does that mean God wasn't invited, where your friends and family came down to kind of watch?
Just a bunch of hellbound atheists, mostly. Yeah, we decided to have a little wedding ceremony in the most religious state, most right-wing state in the country right now. We did, however, find a great humanist officiant there. So if you're ever in North Carolina and need to get married, we got a guy we can hook you up with. It was it's fun, the weather was beautiful, and it was nice to have a couple of weeks off. So to recharge.
And you're white, so you can still vote there.
Yeah, and we can totally vote. It's going to be that kind of day, is it?
It's going to be that kind of day. Well, you want to start us off with some news?
Yeah, just a couple of things caught my eye this week. Massachusetts is challenging the Pledge of Allegiance, finally. And this one might even have a chance of going. This is Secular Coalition for America is challenging it in Doe versus Acton-Boxborough Regional School District. This is in the Massachusetts Supreme Court, and it is based on, he's basing this on the Equal Protection Clause rather than the way it's been done in the past. And this has been a successful tactic in other civil rights litigation, so this has a better chance. And they're in the one state in the union that did not vote for Richard Nixon, so they're pretty liberal state. So the other one thing that was worth mentioning was John McCain was my hero for about 2 minutes this week, and he corrected the crew over at Fox News, who apparently think that Allahu Akbar means death to America. John McCain had to correct them that it actually is like Americans saying thank God. So, of course, he then went on to say something else stupid and lost the hero status, but it was fun for a second. So, Rob. Pat?
Yeah, we're going with the puerile patriot.
Puerile, you mean like childishly silly and trivial?
You really want to go there, Smiley?
Rob, you've been acting weird all day. Did something happen while I was gone?
Oh, did something happen? That tomato picker you hooked me up with?
Tomato picker?
Yeah, that swarthy dude, you said that he could fill in as host if we needed one?
That's racist. That was David Tamayo. He's Hispanic, he's a successful businessman, and he's a real asset to the atheist community.
Yeah, tomato. Look, I was just following my Cuccinelli pocket Bible, and so, I asked for his green card. I said,
What?
What?
That's racist.
I know. Well, then he starts cussing me out in Spanish, and I mean, it was awful. He knocked the condom out of my teeth and told me
condom?
The puerile patriot, I really tried to be prepared for everything. And so we noticed that the state seal's got that goddess, and her breast was showing. So I take out the condom, and I'm going to, hey, what the heck are you, how come all you atheists keep doing that? You got something against condoms?
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry doesn't fix it.
What were you guys talking about while I was away?
Pretty much, we talked about pretty much the same stuff. Culture, politics, atheism, secular stuff, cooch, boobs, those kind of things. And I was saying last week, and I really messed up here. I've got to put an apology out to everybody. I was saying that boobs really can't hurt you unless you shut down Planned Parenthood and stop cancer screening and defund women's clinics. But I was completely wrong about that boobs thing. Can we run that video? I think you'll see what I'm talking about.
I just realized, imagine having this beautiful baby.
I'm Jenny McCarthy.
He's talking, we're going, Mama.
Jenny McCarthy. And I finally found a smarter alternative to cigarettes.
And loving and smiling. And then you come home from a doctor's visit.
I love being single. But here's what I don't love. A kiss that tastes like an ashtray. Blech.
And the smiles are gone, the babbles are gone.
The new starter pack comes with multiple recharging options for your active lifestyle. Everything you need for recharging is now included in the starter pack.
He's now staring out the window for 6 hours.
I can whip out my blue and know that I won't scare any guys away.
The Blue Starter Pack is as slim as a smartphone and as tall as a pack of cigarettes. It comfortably fits wherever you'd normally carry cigarettes, and it even fits in the pockets of the tightest jeans. Where can you charge it? The question is, where can't you charge this thing?
And you go, who came and took my baby?
It's always ready when I am. It's like the smartphone of E6.
Something happened, like we are the first-hand witnesses of something that just shifted so quickly
It's like the smartphone of E6.
for a few months, but we see the
It's like the smartphone of E6.
Now,
So she's not just doing anti-vaxxing stuff now. She's now talking about a new, cleaner way to deliver addictive narcotics into your
nicotine.
system.
Right, and I couldn't tell at the end. I kept playing. It was that E6 or E6. I mean, you watch that video, and you could argue that this is a new method for people that the nicotine patch doesn't work. If you need to deliver nicotine without the other potential carcinogens, then you could make an argument if somebody's already on cigarettes and you want to try to help wean them off the addiction. I didn't get the feeling that that's what she was doing when she was making out with the cigarette. And again, with those anti-sodomy laws, I think Cuccinelli needs to get all over this. And but I do think that it's something we should talk about, where here's a woman that for years has used her celebrity status and her scientific ignorance to lead lots of people down a really bad path. And we see that measles outbreak in Texas now.
Right. Now, I talked about this guy before. That was at, I forget the name of the church, but it's Kenneth Copeland, televangelist. And he lives on a compound, this multi-million-dollar compound on Eagle Mountain Lake, northwest of Fort Worth. I have friends who live literally just right around the corner from him on the lake. And we've been on the boat, we've gone around, we've looked at his house, his boathouse, all the boats he has.
He lives an ascetic life. He's like a monk or something.
Ascetic, I think he's about as far from ascetic as you can get. The man has like 2 Learjets. His compound includes an airfield, which he leases from the state of Texas at a fairly modest cost.
So he's going to have a tight squeeze through the eye of that needle when he's getting into heaven?
Yeah, well, that's going to be a tight squeeze, if you read the Bible literally. I don't see how the man gets there, but, religion has been very, very good to him. But I think this, the anti-vaxxing may have blown up in their case because his church turns out to be the, what's the medical term? The focus, the epicenter of the measles outbreak.
Right.
In Texas, they had a number of cases, and last I heard, they are backpedaling ferociously.
Right.
They might have talked to an earthbound lawyer.
Yeah,
about
I
this.
think that's something that all these people, either the parents that listen to Jenny McCarthy and that listen to Copeland, or the kids whose parents listen to them and don't get vaccinated, there's lawsuits for all sorts of silly, inane things in our country. This would be maybe a much stronger case and a better case that these people use their status. They convince people not to get this. The whole country suffers. Lots of people get sick for it. With Jenny McCarthy, somebody put out a great video to a zombie. I forgot the name of the song. It's with Well, No One Told Me About Her, the way she lied.
Right.
And it goes through a Jenny McCarthy body count, shows all the people that have gotten sick from this and the people that are dying from this. Last week we showed a nice picture of somebody with measles and how these were things that should have been wiped out, could have been wiped out. But they're being brought back by religious right and by other people, and it's not just the religious right that has the crazies and the anti-science.
Well, I think somebody should sue somebody because this, it's as simple as this. If you're campaigning against vaccinations, if you're urging people not to get vaccinations, not to vaccinate their children, and you've been successful, in the hundreds of thousands or millions of parents who have followed your advice, you're killing people. You're killing children. You're doing that.
Right.
Sorry, that doesn't sound very funny, but
yeah, right. Some of this is a little bit less funny, and that just the MMR vaccine alone. We know about the measles. We hear a lot about. It's also for measles, mumps, and rubella. The mumps can lead to sterility in men if they get a kid, and the rubella, the religious right worries about abortions. Yeah. So if you get rubella when you're pregnant, there's a very high rate of miscarriage, and the babies that aren't miscarried have horrible, deformations, malformations. Right.
So it's irresponsible on a number of levels, and somebody needs to sue.
Right, and if they're not
ridiculous, it needs to be shut down.
Right, and if they're not medical, that's fine, but they can't then put themselves forth giving medical advice against vaccinations, against what the whole medical community suggests.
Right,
and has real effects on real people and gets less funny.
Speaking of a tangent, one other thing I saw this week was that, it was on Facebook, so I'm sure it's true, but it said that more Republican children at this point have signed up to stay on their parents' insurance plan than Democratic children. So,
a little irony.
It's funny. It's not just ironic, it's the hypocrisy, but I've discovered recently that hypocrisy doesn't even mean anything anymore. It's become so abused, so stretched, and it just doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah. Speaking of hypocrisy, you probably want to know what else we talked about while you were away.
Yes, I was going to ask. What else did you guys talk about while I was away?
We talked a little bit about Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli, in his gubernatorial run. We talked
Kenny
about the
Cooch.
Now, I can excuse him as a Purell patriot for the fact that he doesn't always follow our regular law with ethics, with campaign, finance donations, with gifts that really just can't be returned because it's too late.
Somebody should investigate him. Who would that fall on?
If we had an attorney general that could look into somebody that if somebody pays him some money and then he lets their case sit on his desk for a year without prosecuting as the attorney general, we need a super attorney general to look into that and see if that's ethical.
It's not just unethical and reprehensible. That's illegal.
It would sound illegal, and I'm not sure who's checking that out. Hopefully, something gets done with that.
Well, surely whoever's in charge of prosecuting these kind of things will be all over that case. So.
Well, if we had a really good attorney general, but let me tell you, even though I want to support the Cooch, I do have a few reservations.
Do you?
I do. First
the
of all,
Patriot has reservations about Kenny the Cooch.
I do. I'm still probably going to lean his way.
Okay.
Nonetheless,
I get that.
There's one thing that he's failed to do with his anti-sodomy law. He has not been very proactive. There's mandatory virginity inspections going on in. How was that? Sumatra? In Sumatra. In Sumatra. And this is one of the biggest islands in the world, but it's still a backwater. It's largely Muslim. It's like 87% Muslim. And these guys are leading the way ethically. They're doing the virginity inspections. Why isn't the Cooch all over this? This should be right up his vaginal alley. He should be getting there and inspecting the kids as they come to school to make sure their virginity is intact. If he does that, I'll think about voting for him. If he can't go there with me, then that's one of my reservations.
Well, the state, I'm sure he could make a compelling case that the state has a compelling interest in knowing the status of every woman's vagina in the state. You're saying Kenny's just not going far enough.
He's not going far.
Not doing enough.
He's not. The same way that Cuccinelli doesn't find that Justice Antonin Scalia is going far enough, the Purell Patriot is finding that the Cooch doesn't go far enough. Here's another problem. While his stance standing against bigotry against gay people is admirable, if you look at the Russians, they're really hammering the gays, and those are a bunch of godless atheists. Now, they are leading the way on attacking gay people. Where's the Cooch? He needs to, again, be a little more assertive and proactive.
More assertive and proactive, absolutely.
All right. Now, those are a couple things. I'm actually willing to work around those a little bit. We have some other slides, though, which I want to go through. And I guess where it really comes down to is Cooch on Pooch action is why, to this point, I can't support him. If we can have our first picture up there. This is actually a little different one. Let's skip this. Maybe we'll come back to this later because I want to get to the dog stuff. Now, while you were gone, some stuff that David and I spoke about was Mother Jones has Cooch watch because he's watching your vagina, so they need to keep an eye on him. We went through a rigorous analysis, proved that Ken Cuccinelli's letters, his initials, are almost identical to Jesus Christ. They're also almost identical to Clark Kent. So after that analysis, you saw Superman, Jesus. We did some close-ups. You can see exactly the Cooch. If you go on to the next picture, we talk about that every superhero has weaknesses. Now with Jesus, it was the cross. And somebody needs to, I guess, phone Mel Gibson, let him know that, I guess the official declaration is it wasn't the Jews anymore. That this was part of God's plan, and so they need to back off that a little bit in terms of blaming us. If you go back to that picture, you can slide back there. Superman's obviously kryptonite. Cuccinelli, vagina dentata, the toothed vagina. Now if we can go on from there, so that's what we've covered in the past weeks. Moving on to this, the problem with the Pooch is that anti-sodomy law is good as far as it goes. Anal sex is out, but what about ankle sex? And you look at that first
ankle
dog,
sex?
Right? He's got no prohibitions on that.
Well, I think the dogs think that if you hump a leg long enough, a vagina will appear in it. But
I've heard that, and it could happen. Going back to that one again, oral sex, right? Oral sex is out, but what about ear sex? I mean, they've got some kind of device in that dog's ear. Yeah. This is on a network TV, well, or at least a public access TV. That shouldn't be out there.
An ear cleaning syringe, it looks like, yeah.
That's what they say it is.
That's what they say.
Right, and then if you go back to that last one, now, interspecies bestiality, that's as bad as interracial dating, which, that wasn't even legal back in 1967. And I applaud Cuccinelli for, his stance on immigration, and where hopefully we'll get to North Carolina levels where we can roll back voting and stop all the blacks and Hispanics from getting out there. But this bestiality thing is something that needs to be addressed separately. So I think that he needs to come out and add to the anti-sodomy law that you cannot plow a plushie or stiff a stuffy. That's not going to be tolerated here in the great state of Virginia. Now,
I was going to say, back to North Carolina, while I was there, had a minor traffic scrape. Wasn't my fault, but had to have my motorcycle towed. The guy who came there, really nice guy, last thing he did before he went away was hand me a tract. A self-published book about Jesus, the right way to get into heaven.
Nice.
I think he saw our atheist license plate.
You think so? They didn't throw some caltrops down to spike your wheels or anything before your accident?
No. He was trying to win me over after the fact there with the
Did he have good results?
Oh, and by the way, another guy who stopped, the motorcyclist who stopped, had a nice big Christian biker thing on his windshield too. So anyway, I digress. North Carolina,
yeah,
it's getting crazy down there.
Yeah, again, to be a little bit less silly for a second, the kind of legislation that they've been enacting there is really trying to disrupt our democracy. And if we let this go through, we're not that shining beacon on a hill, right? We're being destroyed, we're seeing it happen, and yet we're powerless to stop it, even though it's very blatant.
They're determined to have one-party rule in that state, and they've done a pretty good job so far. Almost every state Senate or state House, I'm not sure what their House is like there, their assembly or whatever it is, but every seat almost is held by a Republican. All the top seats, all the majority seats.
I think there's one individual, I forgot his name, but there's one billionaire that has really funded all of this and taken over. And if you think that Citizens United wasn't a strike against the citizens, and you think money isn't buying our politics, everybody should look at North Carolina.
North Carolina's bought and sold now, and they're using it to the max. They're shamelessly pushing forth misogynistic, anti-choice, anti-woman laws. That seems to be their focus. They like to claim that's not us. There's no war on women. It is them, and there is a war on women, and that's all they're doing. When the Congress of the United States is so do nothing that they're a third as active as the do nothing Congress was, and something like 40 of the 60 bills they've passed have been to rename post offices. That's pretty pathetic. It's pure obstructionism, and and what they're doing in North Carolina, they're just trying to build one-party rule that can't be ever voted out with gerrymandering and everything. Permanent one-party rule. That's what they had in Mexico for 80 years. And it was not a good situation.
To America. All right, go to that next slide. There's some more pooch action. Now, this may be customary, but again, this is not behavior we should have going on here. They've got a menage a trois, doggy style no less, on the bottom. And then the very last slide, I think, is the really important one, because that talks about Hump Day, and it makes it like it's a big joke, but it's not a joke, because Hump Day is Wednesday. Wednesday is named after Wotan, or Odin. We can get rid of that slide. So this is really taking a strike against God, not our current God, but against Odin, the father of Norse mythology, whose son was Balder, who had to go, got killed, had to wait until the end times, or Ragnarok, or Armageddon, to come back up and lead to a brand new world. He was a sun god. Okay, keep that in mind, a sun god. Not unlike our Father, now in heaven, and his son Christ, who's also going to come back at the end of times, and is also a sun god. If you look at some of those pictures, the raised.
He's also a god with a track record of success. He promised that he would end the ice giants. And as far as I can tell, he has done that admirably. Right.
Odin fulfilled his part of the bargain. The end times, which were supposed to be, all the Gospels, it was supposed to be coming right then back in those times, and we're 2,000 years later, hasn't happened.
There seem to be problems with that, whole theory.
Moving on to the next slide here. Now, here's one thing. These are very cute beagles, right? And the question is Cuccinelli against all dogs, or is he not prohibiting any dog stuff? Is that why we haven't seen this anti-dog legislation? But he is against beagles, and let me show you the next one who he's really against. And then it gets a little less funny, not even too funny. Oops. This is the Cooch going spread eagle to stop the HMS Beagle, which gets into evolution. So this was Charles Darwin. And this is what it really all boils down to, is that, and we can bag this when you're ready, that the people on the Christian right, as much as they want to start claiming evolution as theirs, know that they really can't afford to do it, because it pokes so many holes in the whole elaborate card system that they've built up. And if you pull out a few of those base cards, everything collapses.
Right. I mean, they've painted themselves into a terrible corner, what with the internet contradicting them every day, but taking the position that science, evolution must be wrong, and by extension, scientists and science, and by further extension, school teachers who teach this in science classes in our public schools are not just wrong, but evil, basically. This is what that type of mindset does. It teaches that smart is evil.
Right, it's been a very long-running anti-intellectual campaign.
Very strongly anti-intellectual, and we've seen that in history, and people get hung and burned when the anti-intellectual forces take over.
Right, and unless you have a scientific framework of some sort to judge things by, like, does the Bible make sense? As long as you leave it in the hands of the priests who are making billions of dollars by having this, bogus stuff go on, they're not going to call. They've had 2,000 years to admit that this is bogus. Each time, somebody takes a telescope and looks in the heavens and absolutely proves till they're shamed and embarrassed and they can't lie anymore, then they come out and they claim it was their discovery. They were all, whole in favor of it.
Well, this is the heart of our basic struggle. If one side of the debate won't even agree to acknowledge scientific facts, demonstrable facts, things that can be demonstrated, that are proven, that we know about how the universe works. If you can't get them to agree on that, the very basis of facts, it's a real uphill battle. But I think it is one that they're slowly losing, because in the end, facts do seem to always win out.
I think they absolutely lose in the intellectual sphere. They're certainly losing in terms of people are getting sufficiently disgusted with religion in some quarters and walking away from it. But on the other hand, you're also getting the political religious side is incredibly motivated. They'll turn out not 40%, they'll turn out 150%.
They're well funded, they're determined. And if you've ever seen the Discovery Institute, the Wedge document, where they basically lay out how they want to destroy the teaching of evolution, supplant it with the biblical creationism fable.
Right, it's important to remember that intelligent design was intelligently designed for the very purpose of trying to sneak in and then get rid of evolution. And we've talked about this before, how they crave, the religion part craves the scientific respectability.
The credibility of science. They use the terminology. They try to make what they do now sound like science.
Right.
But the fact is, I say this over and over again, don't get your science at church. You cannot get good science from people who hate science, who have a vested interest in the destruction of science. And so just don't get your science at church.
One of the little jokes we made with Cuccinelli, where his initials are so close to Superman's and so close to Jesus Christ, that's that kind of bogus pseudo logic that we act like that means something. Obviously, that's just being silly. Here's a book, it couldn't just happen, and it is silly to the same degree. It's very puerile, it's very moronic, but it's actually a serious book. I mean, they're not joking when they write this stuff. I highlight a couple things just to mention. This really shows where religion is trying to claim whatever scientific advance has been made as if God is the one that had discovered it before, even though religion might have fought tooth and nail and killed people over it, but once it comes out, then religion wants it as theirs. So long ago, God told Abraham, look up at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. What does this show? That God knew, although in the day before telescopes nobody else could have possibly known, that it's impossible to count the number of stars. So leading up to this is a page or so talking about how we're got 100 billion to 200 billion galaxies. Each one of those has 100 billion to 200 billion stars. Wow, isn't that a lot? Back in the biblical days, people could only see a handful. But the Bible just said it there. It predicted that, except it didn't say there's 100 billion galaxies with 100 billion stars each. It said what,
Well, it seems to me like they were actually just struggling with the problem of counting the stars anyway, because some people with really good eyes could see more on a really dark night than you could see on an average night. So I think they were dealing with a practical problem there without extending that, without making an educated guess that there were, the vast bulk of all that is out there we can't even see with the naked eye.
Right, but they're happy to pass themselves off as they are the Edwin Hubbles. They talk about all sorts of science. You know, any of the stuff you want to read in physics and astronomy, you will find it in this book in, you know, a little superficial form as they try to lay claim. So with Edwin Hubble, and all these scientists were despised by the church as they were coming through, you know, during their time periods. But you know, his great Hubble telescope, where he realized that the whole universe is expanding like a great big balloon, everything's going away from each other really fast. Once again, it couldn't just happen unless God did it. Where does God come in other than denying it?
Right.
It comes in the book, but nowhere else.
The title is kind of provocative too, because it reminds me of a book that I read about 10 years ago, and I've been trying to get every atheist I've ever met to read this book. It's called Complexity by Mitch Waldrop, and it shows how it can just happen. He talks about not just spontaneous complexity in the universe, but emergent phenomena. And these happen, his basic premise is that with very simple building blocks and very simple tools or rules, you can get very complex behavior. For instance, everything is made up pretty much of 3 quarks. With 3 quarks, you get 100 or so different atoms, and from those atoms you get all of chemistry, which is pretty much all of everything that we can see in the universe. And what we can see with these basic 100 atoms is complex molecules. With the most common of these molecules, we get amino acids. And these things, these atoms, don't just sit there, they like to combine into compounds. Some of these things can't be stopped. Some things are real easy to make, like water and hydrogen sulfide and lots of chemicals and amino acids. When you get all these chemicals together in a big chemical soup, the size of an ocean, you know, in a petri dish, the size of a planet, a wet, warm planet, you get all kinds of complex chemical interactions. You get amino acids everywhere. And these things eventually learn how to chain, and what we are is just long chains of amino acids. So his basic premise leads to the conclusion that life is not an accident. It's pretty much of an inevitability when you have this much chemical richness on a wet, warm rock. So I think we need to go to break now, Paul. I think it's time to go to break.
We'll be back, talk a little bit more about evolution, maybe abiogenesis, and talk about some other books
and
here.
Quirrell Pat will be back.
At NASA right now, scientists and engineers are working every day to help humans learn how to better care for our home, so that we never have to leave. NASA has a fleet of satellites around the planet that keeps track of climate change and studies how humans are affecting the planet. NASA has a ton of geniuses, and all of them are working for a future that has a healthy Earth in it. Like when NASA helped find the hole in our ozone layer so we could fix it before the problem got out of control, NASA is doing its part. We have to do ours. This is our home. To learn more about how NASA is keeping an eye on Earth, visit www.nasa.gov/Earth.
When I was younger, I didn't want to admit I had a serious disease. Because of my diabetes, I lost the sight in my left eye. Misconceptions continue to surround this monster public health issue. But the simple truth is, diabetes can often be prevented and complications avoided. You're not alone. Understand the realities of diabetes and know that you can manage it and lead a full, active life.
There's an alarming trend in the world today. Everywhere you go, people are saying that cinema is dead. But cinema is not dead. My name is Count Simon Gauntley, and on my television program, Count Gauntley's Horrors from the Public Domain, I make it my mission to resurrect forgotten film classics. I promise to dredge the sewers and ford the stagnant streams of film history to ensure that no film is truly lost to the ages. Count Gauntley and FPA, keeping cinema alive! Alive! Alive!
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18 months, we've made the decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And I was cleaning the bathroom one day and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Hello, we are back. Rick, you have an announcement?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. As a state director for American Atheists, which is a 501c3, and as the founder of Beltway Atheists, which is also a 501c3, we can't be political. We can't endorse candidates specifically, but we can criticize bad ideas and, frankly, bad candidates. And so we're having a great deal of fun with Ken Cuccinelli and some of the others, and the fact that in Congress, in the House of Representatives, the Science Committee is staffed with young Earth creationists. It's insane, but
it's a looming disaster too. I mean, you know, in our age of technology, we actually need to go based on facts. You know, you mentioned that. Usually, scientists don't get overtly political either. Michael Mann, I don't know if you can see this book. This is Michael Mann is the climate scientist that Cuccinelli has forced UVA to spend $600,000 on defense of some trumped up, you know, bogus stuff.
Right.
And Cuccinelli pretending that climate change doesn't exist.
Yeah, for Virginia residents, that's our Attorney General, who made the University of Virginia spend $600,000 on a fishing expedition to try to discredit climate change.
Right, and this is the same way the tobacco industry used to try to discredit the scientists, how you know, the main polluters went after like Rachel Carson and tried to discredit her. It's not that their facts are wrong. It's if you can shame the person or annihilate the person, then maybe the stuff can go away. Michael Mann hasn't gone away, fortunately. He did leave Virginia. He's up at, I think, Penn State now. But this book, he left a little note. It says, "Dear Cooch," because he didn't actually write this, that's just me. "Stop noodling the pooch and take a look at this. It has pictures." Now, I don't think he's a science literalist. I don't think he means noodling the pooch. I think he's talking metaphorically. And he means, Cuccinelli, stop screwing around with all of your, you know, irrelevant stuff, trying to find out about people's sex lives and what they do. It makes no difference. If you want to be governor, hopefully you're actually do some governance. Now, climate change is utterly real. Here in Virginia, you know, we have a large area on the beach. About, you know, if the current predictions come true, a lot of people, you know, kind of on the edges of all the continents are going to be in for displacement. They think that maybe 10 to 15% of people around the world are going to be displaced when the oceans rise.
Bangladesh is like 6 feet above sea level for 100 miles inland.
Right, so you're talking like 700 million people, and then you have Cuccinelli doing these silly things about an anti-sodomy law that he wants to get passed again, and ignoring climate change, and that's devastating. That's going to hurt
Not merely
people.
Ignoring it, trying to discredit it so they don't have to act on it.
Right.
Still taking the position that no, we don't, that's not us. What is that principle called? It's us doing it or it's not us doing it?
My head was already thinking about other people that have done that. I was thinking back to Ronald Reagan with his AIDS denialism, and how we sat as a nation for those 8 years. I think at the very end he finally admitted it, that yeah, AIDS is out there and that it's real. There's a clip, I didn't do it for today, maybe we'll do it for another day, where Reagan has this very heartwarming thing where he says, you know, we changed, we learned things. I've learned, and he basically said that AIDS isn't just for gay people. So it wasn't that he felt bad that he was condemning gay people to death. That's fine. The Bible says they're abhorrent, much as Cuccinelli would defend. What his realization was that even kids can get it, you know, if it's transmitted through the mother. So maybe we should take it seriously. I would argue, as somebody on the more humanist side, that gays are people too. And maybe if there's an epidemic sweeping through our country and you're a president, a senator, a governor, and you're going based on the Bible that says these aren't real people because they're gays, or if you're ultra right wing and they're, you know, if you're John Bircher and they're blacks or they're Jews, that's a real problem. We need to have people in office that are taking care of everybody.
And it points to the reason, back to what I was saying before, why we seem to be hypercritical of the right. It's because of these ideas they have, the science denialism, the just fact denial. You know, it was the AIDS, as you said, and Reagan, and the climate change now, and anything to do with evolution. It's just, it's leading us in the wrong direction.
But it translates into real policy. If people
translates into real policy,
really believe,
exactly.
then if they really act, if they believe it, they act on it, and look where we are.
And in a sense, the president and the Congress are sort of the parent figures for the country, and we as children are supposed to believe what they tell us, but it should be true what they're telling us. But the point is, they're feeding this denialism into the system, and they're hurting America. They're hurting the world, actually. And we need to get out. Anybody who doesn't believe in science has no purpose on the science committee other than sabotage.
And anybody that's not willing to learn enough science that they're not doing damage has no business at the upper echelons of politics, where they lead to catastrophic damage. There's 300+ million Americans. If you have George Bush in there saying stem cells, we can't do that, or pretending we have plenty of stem cells, we have 60, 70 lines, when it turned out we have 5 lines or so of stem cells. That's a lot of people, and we showed a slide on this last week, that have all sorts of conditions that maybe could have been cured. So when we're eventually saving 1 million people a year from Parkinson's, remember, we went through 8 years of not curing them, very specifically because, you had a evangelical in the White House who didn't want to do it because of his religious beliefs, that there's a soul formed in the zygote, thus we cannot harvest those because that's against God.
Right, and in the last couple of weeks, I believe it was while I was on vacation, it was announced that clinical trials on humans for an AIDS vaccine will begin, I think, next year. We're going to get this thing. We are going to solve this at some point, and we're going to do it with science. We're going to do none of it by religion or magic or praying. It's going to be people doing science that lick this thing.
But as Mitt Romney would say, I'll bet you $10,000 that religion will ultimately claim God cured AIDS. Amen. How wonderful. God finally did it. Yeah. That's how smart God is.
Right. And in other news, Tim Tebow got cut. So,
just in case we run out of time at the end, I want to say, today is the beginning of football season, and so I'm a Cowboys fan, and up here in D.C. there's not a whole lot of us. So
you're a Cowboy fan? I grew up around Dallas. So.
Well, there you go. I was back in the Tom Landry days.
Tony Romo has personally probably ruined the Cowboys for me.
I like Romo. But what I want to say is that I'm thinking that David Tamayo, when I gave him the green card, he stole my real American football and left me with this.
Well, that's not a football. That's a football, according to the spelling. So
anyway, in addition to the green card, I'm giving David a red card, and you will not be back for a couple weeks from Pure All Patriot. Anyway, moving back on, one of the important things to realize about science and evolution is that our knowledge base keeps on building, and sometimes it can be an incremental process, but we don't have to keep going back to ground zero and starting all over. In religion, when you have Jerry Falwell making up the cause of Hurricane Katrina, it's not like he's built on 200 years of science and our progressive understanding of what causes hurricanes.
Yeah, no, the gays caused it, because that's exactly how the universe works.
Right, and it's very easy to say it doesn't take a whole lot of prep time for the preacher to memorize that little nugget, whereas for a scientist to defend that or to defend climate change, you have to learn all sorts of stuff to be able to speak about it intelligently. And it's like debating with an apologist, I guess. They can fling some mud, and then it's your job to learn all the ways to clean that up.
Well, that's just typical of what I was saying. That's what you get when you ask a preacher about science. You're going to get something other than science. And I just wanted to point out one quick thing here. When Rob reads a book, can you see that? It's kind of how I do sometimes too. I kind of run out. Well, it's actually still going on all the way at the back of the book.
I'm not sure it all sticks, unfortunately. But no, I mean, it's something that everybody in school should be learning about evolution, and it's no accident that intelligent design and the creationists fight so strongly to make sure that our population stays as uneducated as possible. Once you learn multiple strands of evidence that all point toward the same conclusion, it gets harder to listen to a preacher say some wacky stuff and nod your head and go along with it.
Well, there's some people who are tuned to that. I mean, a lot of people go in there, you know, basically, again, probably trying to do the right thing. This was what they were taught was good and right and proper as children, and they still believe it. Although when you watch these things on TV, and I do watch these things on TV, I turn on the religion channels all the time, and just to see what they're up to, and it's still the same crazy stuff. The faith healing is the craziest of it, and should, you know, somebody should, you know, press charges or something. I know it's hard to outlaw something like that, but it's just charlatanry. It is flagrant, naked, greedy charlatanry. What they're doing, they're not healing anybody, obviously, and they're causing people to throw away their medication. I think they're probably killing people as much as anti-vaxxers are.
Yeah, I mean, they throw away their money, their time. The kids get hurt if it's the parents making the decision, and if it's a grown-up, they're not making that decision in a vacuum. They're making it in a context that's been poisoned by all sorts of people pumping out nonsense. Speaking of nonsense, on the way over, I listened to a radio preacher for a little bit because it happened to come on the radio, and I was really struck by how much money is underneath all of this. I don't listen to those shows so much, but so one of the things that is Jesus hears everything and knows every thought. That's both scary and comforting. One of the things that he knows is that Jesus parked himself by the treasury, and he's watching you, and he sees how much you contribute, and he knows how much you could contribute.
So the rap is that God/Jesus watch everything, right? Including all the gay porn in the world too, I suppose. So something to think about.
Yeah, but I mean, for a serious note though, in terms of the money, because I turned back into that, listen for a few minutes, as much as you take, then go and come back. And money is a constant thing. Like when people go to church, I think they're told over and over, it's good to give. And there's a couple other tales. One that was of this poor, destitute woman. She only had 2 pennies or coppers or whatever she had, yet she wanted to give both of them, and how wonderful this was, and God working in some mysterious ways. She didn't realize how profound it was, but as these preachers tell her story 1,000 years later, and she's in the Bible, she's inspired millions of other people to give. So the church, in a very unsubtle way here, is making sure you know you really should be giving, and God's watching. God's going to really reward you for this. You're going to do a great thing by giving us your money. Now, does God have a P.O. box? How is this getting funneled up to heaven?
Well, you had something about a woman who gave her a ring too, right?
That was there's a separate story about how another poor, impoverished woman, and I noticed that the Christian church doesn't seem to care very much about women's rights here in the real world, but in the church, it kept on being morality tales based on the woman. So this was another woman who was very poor, took off her ring and put it into the collection pot. And then the deacon noticed this and told her later, no, you need this more than I do. So that seems like a good thing. The woman, of course, says, you have no right to give this back to me. I gave it to God. Right. So how does it get to God?
Well, you know, I think if you follow that ring, it won't get to God. What's going to happen is it's going to go to this guy's gold broker. It's going to be melted down, and that cash is going to go into the ministry, possibly into a very nice boathouse on Eagle Mountain Lake in Fort Worth, Texas, or for a new Learjet for somebody, because these guys are living pretty well.
Now, we got trouble here.
We have a phone caller. Can you hear me, caller? Is the caller? Can we hear the caller?
Yeah, because that caller's been red carded. We don't hear him, so we're going to bag him. If he calls back, I just want him to know, because this was a David Tamayo. This is called a red card. You should know what a red card is. If you call back, you're going to get a yellow card, which is an extra warning for next time. So, anyway, no, you're welcome to call back. We'd love to talk to you.
Try again. We can't hear you.
Now, some other things that I heard from this preacher when I was listening. We know not to exploit the widow, because God says it in the Bible.
Right.
And it's like, what? So anybody else you can exploit? They make fun of how atheists don't have morals. You have to get it from God. So God says, don't exploit the widow. So the preacher tells his parishioners, don't exploit widows. It says in the Bible. Everybody else is fair game?
Apparently. Apparently that's what televangelists think. And, like they said during Watergate, follow the money. And it flows upward to them.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems embarrassing. But speaking of embarrassing, okay, we're going to try again. David Tamayo on the phone.
David?
Yes, hi guys. I hear they're handing out green cards there, and might have left my soccer ball there also.
Yeah, I was looking for my football. Green cards and red and yellow. I think you've got all three at this point. Congratulations.
Yes. Now you're going to start the trend. We're going to have a lot of people now wanting to come in for green cards there.
That's true. Well, the only problem is we shoot against a green screen, so we might have to go over a different color card if you want to see it up here.
Yeah, it looked kind of bluish.
You know, I did my best. So what's going on with you today?
Well, I wanted to say that it's good to see Rick back in one piece.
And thanks for filling in while I was gone, David.
Oh, my pleasure. And I'm just worried about the motorcycle, though.
No, the motorcycle will be fine. It's got some repairs. I wasn't hurt. I was moving 0 miles an hour. I got slightly tail-ended. And so the damage is all covered, so it's not a problem.
Do you consider it a miracle that you were hit or a miracle that you survived? Because it was clearly a miracle.
Well, it was just a network, a meshwork of miracles going on there.
Definitely.
So.
Praise Jesus for that. It was no accident that you were in the Carolinas where, it's a Jesus state, and that's probably why nothing happens to you.
That you make a good point. I hadn't even thought of that, but good point.
Well, fellows, I just wanted to call and say hello and say that I was watching you live, and great show. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, we appreciate it. We'll see you in a few weeks.
David, we'll see you.
Bye. All right.
Okay.
Now, let me see. I think I had one other thing here. The widow, preacher. Oh, yes. One other constant point was that, so the poor people give. That's very important because Jesus is watching. Mm-hmm. Rich people also give. The preacher made such a tap dance around this because Jesus knows how you earned his money was one point, right? So if you were a scumbag exploiting people like widows and everybody else and you became a multimillionaire from that, Jesus knows that. Mm-hmm. But the church really does need money to run on. So if these rich people give lots of money, we should not chastise them. We should not ridicule them because it's important that they give. We should appreciate their generous donations that they got from exploiting everybody else. Again, we worry about morality and hiccups and things like that.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, but so again, this is the preacher that these parishioners are going to get their morality from because he's interpreting the Bible. And the whole thing that he's saying is, sure, we'll take your blood money. We need it. Just you give us money. And what is the new Pope doing? As liberal as he seemed in some ways, you can go on Twitter, get indulgences.
Right, which raises the question, begs the question, I wonder if the Pope tithes also. I wonder if he's a subscription tither.
You'd think if
I wonder if Kenneth Copeland tithes.
If the whole church tithe, they would make multi-billions very quickly. If they paid the taxes that they don't pay our government, I guess if they just keep that money, that will help them get.
That's why we can't have nice stuff right there. We should tax the churches. That's right, I said it.
Yeah, no, but again, and that's another matter that isn't a joke. And this was brought up, I forgot which president years ago brought in his petition, said people are not going to tolerate if you give the churches all of the benefits, and then all the regular people realize that they're not paying their fair share or any share.
Right.
That's going to lead to a problem.
And yet feel fully entitled to participate in vigorously in the political process. Not just the electoral process, but the political process. And endorsements and everything. Those churches are also 501c3s that get special tax breaks, special privileges that are not available to non-churches. And there is regulation against politicking from the pulpit, which is universally ignored apparently at this point, and no enforcement whatsoever.
And at the grassroots level, it's absolutely critical because they don't get 50 million people turning out. They get a tiny trickle. And so if you have churches that can turn out a large body of their parishioners, they can actually stack the school boards, stack all the local offices.
Which is how the school boards got flooded during the 80s and the 90s, the stealth school boards. They would wait around until everybody left and then vote on things.
Right, and then what's the first thing they go after once they have the school boards?
Well, there's prayer in school.
Okay, I was going with evolution, but you're right. Prayer, they want prayer back in school. Sure. But education-wise, evolution. And again, I think it's important to remember that I think even though the Catholic Church officially accepted evolution at some point in the last decade or so, that's only because they've been embarrassed into it and they can't quite avoid it without looking very silly. but they're still working all the back roads to get it out of the school, to get it out of people's minds, and to get rid of it, because evolution destroys biblical belief if people go through any thought process.
It's simple. If evolution is true, then the literal Bible is dead. Starting at Genesis.
Right. Until if the Bible preaches a 6,000 year old Earth, either it's true or not, and if it's not true, and if you're putting this forth as the infallible Word of God, if you're looking at it scientifically, you've now just disproven the hypothesis that the Bible is the infallible Word of God. So throw it out. Don't get your morality from there. So even though they say we'll accept evolution, deep down, the kind of religious guys know, once religion is proven, everybody knows it, we don't make sense.
Plus, when they're arguing against demonstrable facts, against the facts of evolution, it puts them in where they end up having to do some very convoluted apologism. And anybody who's debated with them online knows what I'm talking about. But it's just remarkable, the denial and the things it leads them to say, and the requirement that they not only deny specific facts, but the very framework of gathering knowledge, the scientific methodology. Humankind has a framework, a rigorous framework for determining what is true about the universe. And there are certain things that we have discovered which we can verify, which are true. And yet they are just denied. Just no, it can't be. It can't be true.
The real beauty of the science is not only can you go verify it, but I can and anybody else can. Part of science is you reproduce, here are the methods. If you read a scientific paper, this is the method section. And it shows how I went about doing this study. And you can read through it, and you can see if there was a flaw in the amount of people that they took, or if they took a biased audience. But you can see their experiment. That's how science works. Religion is quite the opposite. Everything's a black box. Only the highest of the high can know it. And you're being unfaithful if you even ask the question.
Yeah, the difference between science and religion is in science, if you blow up a long-standing, treasured, deeply held theory, you'll win a Nobel Prize.
Right, you're a hero.
If you start trying to blow up theories or allegations in church, very bad things can happen.
Right, you get ostracized now. Back in the old days,
now it's only ostracization.
Right, it used to be a little worse in some senses. It's funny you talk about sort of jumping through mental hoops if you're going to try to defend the religious concept in the Bible as literal. We had Justin Vakula on a couple of weeks ago, and he, during his debate with a preacher, the preacher dared to raise slavery as an issue to defend the Bible. And then somebody asked about it, I think, afterward, and he couldn't touch it, because what are you going to say? That, the Bible condones slavery. Yeah, I guess it should have been an easy call. And so the mental hoops that they have to run around, and he sort of chose, instead of trying to go through that twisted set of loops, to say, well, this isn't part of the debate. So even though he brought it up, trying to duck it. But theodicy and the question of all the evil in the world is a big problem that religion just can't rationally get past.
That's where you get into some very bizarre justifications, and apologism is when they start trying to justify theodicy.
We had John Hagee, we had a clip of him a few weeks ago, saying that Hitler was like the henchman of God, and God wanted to get the Jews to Israel, so he needed a tool like Hitler to nudge them in that direction by killing the 6 million Jews, I guess. And then to sit back and say, yes, I'm more moral because I know the Bible, it's just ludicrous. And I think lots of people are starting to see that now. And like you say, read your Bible. Anybody
read your Bible.
That's got to be offensive to almost anybody.
Yeah, and they're stuck over and over again trying to justify these beliefs, and it just leads them to more and more bizarre justifications.
And then they also have to keep rejecting more and more different branches of science. That's some of the strength of evolution, is it's not just the fossil record, although that's great. Evolution proves itself completely without the fossils.
It's funny when you get on the blogs and read the anti-evolution blogs, they are convinced that evolution will be dead in 2 years. And I hate to tell them, but this is not so much a challenge, or I don't know if this is a challenge or a taunt, but let's look again in 100 years and see if the creationist, the ridiculous biblical creationism fable, is the foundation of science, or if we're still doing evolution. And I would hazard a guess that evolution will be secure and still in place as the the backdrop, the basis, the underlayment of all the biological sciences.
Right, and if you go outside of the United States, it's already there pretty much, right? You know,
Yeah.
we're, for such a technologically sophisticated place, we are so backwards with this, and you have to keep your eyes closed so tightly not to listen to anybody else. And you know, you look at the age of the Earth, and we have, you know, if you did one study or like one sample of a rock and found that it was a certain age, you could dispute that. In this book, Evolution and the Myth of Creationism, where it goes through a bunch of typical creationist pseudo arguments, you know, it points out that there's like 100,000 measurements.
Yeah.
So it just becomes so silly and childish and puerile for somebody to sit there and
it's not
argue.
it's not just a standalone measurement in a vacuum. It is coherent. It agrees with other data. This is cross-reference.
It agrees with how, you know, how nuclear science works and nuclear physics, what we figured out. And again, that really is the strength, where you have so many different multiple strands intersecting. And if you want to talk about it couldn't just happen, it couldn't just happen that 10 different strands of science come up with this same arbitrary result, you know, unless there's a systemic bias that was built in, and that gets less likely when you have multiple different strands of science pointing to the same area, and where you have multiple groups of experimenters.
And as part of this rigorous process, this is the beauty of the scientific method, is it is so rigorous, and it is constantly correcting, self-correcting. It is the methodology by which we discover all knowledge, validate all knowledge, and understand what is true about the universe we live in. And I frankly, it just boggles my mind that people not only have a problem with this, or maybe don't understand it, but condemn the notion that this process even exists.
Well, I think we can see why that is on the top, right? There's a very big vested monetary interest and power interest, you know, political power and social power, of making sure that, you know, these priests, who might otherwise be leeches or parasites or not have anything to do, instead are high up on the top of the pecking order, rich as sin, respected. What, the atheists are like the least respected group. Why? Because we want to be nice to each other, because we believe in science.
That's not the reason. The reason is, for most of the last 2,000 years, they've told people that we were the devil incarnate.
Right. If you hear something over and over, and George Bush was very good at this, the way the brain works, if you hear it 1,000 times and it's very easy to retrieve and it pops in your head.
Huxley, Brave New World, 68,400 repetitions equal a truth. I think we're just about out of time here.
We are. Next week I'll be here with Elizabeth Cornwell and
having Dr. Dawkins on in a couple of weeks.
Well, that's going to be a couple weeks from now. We're going to have
that's Richard Dawkins.
Name is William Johnson on I'mAnExMormon.com.